Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. The new concert band and jazz ensemble music releases from Excelsior Music Publishing are here now and available from wherever you get your band music, featuring works of all levels from an incredible composer roster. Listen, browse, and get inspired at excelsiormusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. Do you spend valuable time all year correcting students' hand position instead of focusing on the music? Thumb Gummy solves this. These simple, cost-effective teaching aids fit on trumpets and trombones to guide the right hand into proper position, reducing tension, improving form, and giving tactile feedback so students can focus on playing, not adjusting. It's easy to use, comfortable, and designed by teachers and players, not just for your beginners, but for older students as well. Join thousands of students and bands already seeing the difference. And keep an eye out for our new clarinet thumb rest coming soon. Visit thumbgummy.com to learn more. That's thumbgummy.com. Tuner Caddy is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. The Tuner Caddy was created by Mark Casperson, a band director with over 38 years of experience. Like most of us, he was tired of dropped tuners, wasted time, and students fumbling with their gear. So he did what any passionate teacher would do. He invented a solution. Mark designed the original Tuner Caddy after testing 57 different versions. The classic model fits right onto most music stands, holds any tuner, and even has a pencil holder. Then he added the Student Pro, a slimmer, binder-friendly with magnets, so it sticks right to the wire stands. And now there's even the TCT60M, a full tuner and metronome combo that's transposable and includes a 6-foot mic. Super practical and more affordable than most other options out there. The best part is that these tools don't just help kids stay organized, they actually improve how we teach intonation and tone. Tuner Caddy is being used by some of the top programs in the country, from Texas to Virginia, and it's even been on stage at the Midwest Clinic and Music for All Festival. You can find Tuner Caddy at tunercaddy.com, at local retailers, or through Music and Arts, Sweetwater, and Premier Music Teaching Aids. They even offer support for educators writing grants. Check them out at tunercaddy.com. If you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Yeah, one thing I learned from Matthew Arau when I met with him was when we sit at computers, especially, we hunch over. So,
Oh yeah.
like, I have a copier in my room. I'm really lucky to have a photocopier in the office. So half the time that's my desk. I'm standing, or if I have to be on email or whatever, I'm doing my best to be moving. And I'll do a hard right turn here as well. Sleep is on that same side of things. This year my wife and I have gone to bed between 8 and 8:30 just about every single night. Don't get up till 5:30, and that amount of sleep has helped me, because when you're in front of a bad band, and if my students are listening, I'm not saying you're bad every day, but if you're listening to stuff that you want to improve and you're exhausted, man, that's really hard. But if you're at your best, then you can have a good attitude about it, and you're, doing better for your students. So a lot of people forget about the sleep thing, but sleep is such important.
Yeah, absolutely. And your mental state. I used to have a rule, and I sort of still do to some extent, but before rehearsal, and rehearsals are pretty routine, pretty organized in terms of routine in the Navy band, in a professional group. 9 a.m. is when we would start rehearsal every day, unless told to do something else, because other tasking got in the way. But my rule that I put in place, which everyone thought initially was about me being selfish, but they came to realize it was actually about me looking after them, was that for an hour before that rehearsal, so from when I got to work and started work at 8 o'clock, to the start of the musical rehearsal for the day, I wasn't to be brought any problems. Don't give me problems. Don't tell me about that thing. As long as it can wait. Sometimes there are immediate and urgent problems that needed to be fixed, but quite rarely. They were free to bring those to me anytime between midday and midnight. Really, I kind of never turned the phone off in those days. But don't bring me something that's just going to rattle my cage 5 minutes before we start a musical rehearsal and then expect me to be that musical leader who's focused on art.
Mm.
If it can wait, make it wait. Let's make sure that we as conductors are in really, as you say, in really good shape. Try and get enough sleep. Look after your diet, guys. Find time to get some exercise. One of my favorite sayings that I even feel hypocritical saying because it's something it's aspirational for me as well. I'm not the world's best time manager. I had a wonderful team when I ran Navy band groups who helped me manage my time. Um, and some days I do struggle here in my own house now that I run my own business and live my own life and work for myself to just manage time effectively. Um, but the the more effectively we can use our time, we're always going to be able to find the time for the things that are most important to us. I think that's the sort of the key saying here. Um, we'll always prioritize and find time for the things that we believe really matter to us. So when people say I don't have time for that, what they're saying to me is that it's not important enough to them. There are some examples and some folks out there who are grossly overworked and are so time poor that they have to prioritize in a way that they're not happy with. And I'm not throwing rocks at them at all. They're everywhere. Teachers, for example, who don't have time to go to the bathroom, who don't have time to eat lunch, who don't have time to spend with that one child when 30 others need their help.
Mm-hmm.
I get it, but as much as we can, we really should prioritize time and self-care time in the working week to make sure that we're in good shape and mentally we're ready to find beauty rather than just remove angst. They're two very different states of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And as you rightly say, if you're standing in front of an elementary school band in about their 6th week of playing, you'll find the angst. It'll arrive and it'll ring your doorbell. It's a little unavoidable. So we better be in a good mood and we better be well rested. And we better be ready to be mentally resilient and kind.
Matt, another way that I tend to be able to find art or beauty within the music we're doing is when I've done the score study. If I haven't studied the score, like, because there's days when you're, say, a public school teacher, I'll say, because that's what I've always done. And, it's like, this is period 4 again with the same kids again, and it's month 9. And like, what's going to happen at 11:52 versus 11:57 to think in that small of a detail. But we all know that that's true. It can get cumbersome. It can get tiring if you're thinking about what this band sounds like right now, because maybe it's not filling your musical cup. You might not be at a place where they're fulfilling you. But if I've done the score study and, maybe with music that's for younger musicians, this might be harder to do, to like really do the score study on a grade half. I'm like, okay, done.
Yeah.
But when you can really dig deep into the score study, and to me, that's exciting. Like if I'm hanging out, I've said this story before with Down a Country Lane by Copeland, like that's so exciting, no matter what they sound like, but I can come to rehearsal and be excited about what we're doing because I'm excited about that music. And I've discovered the music because I've done the score study. And I find when I'm in seasons of the year when I maybe, oh, shoot, this week got away from me, and I'm already doing this, and I should have spent 5 hours on this piece already, and I haven't. That's when I find like the score study hurts my teaching.
Yep. Yeah, look, I can't agree. I can't agree with all of that more. And there's certainly times where every one of us is guilty of being a bit underprepared. I think it's folly to think that never happens. The very first lesson I was ever taught, morning one, day one of my first conducting course was, and the gentleman got his hand out and splayed his 5 fingers and said, never, 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 never sight read a score in front of musicians. A powerful lesson, which is kind of ironic now that I'm a clinician and I travel around doing festivals where I sight read scores incessantly in front of bands. I do it a lot, but there's an art to doing that too. But if you're running your ensemble every week, don't be sight reading. Don't do that. And allow the first time in that concert cycle or that year, for example, allow the first time that does happen, allow it to feel awful. Because that's our lesson we don't want to feel like that again. We've really let ourselves down at that point, and often for good reasons. Let's keep that real. Going back to what we we're saying about time management, but yeah, the more prepared you can be, and it might be a grade 1 or 1.5 or half piece. It might be that and although he writes some amazing and very serious music, it might be that Randall Standridge's, Santa Apocalypse piece, and that's okay. But find what's good about it. Don't just dismiss it as a glib, throwaway thing. People that write that music, I think, are immensely clever. I can't sit down and write a grade half or grade one piece. No chance. I'm not good enough to do that. I don't know how they do it. I'm the Australian and New Zealand distributor for Randall Standard's music, which is why I keep bringing it up. I know his catalogue back to front, and it's amazing. And there's a lot of music in there for the lower grades that if you didn't bother to look into what it's actually about and what other teaching moments, what other techniques that this piece is designed to develop in your students, you could think it's just a throwaway grade half or grade one little glib thing. But he will have spent hours and hours making compositional decisions and pedagogical decisions about what am I going to write in this thing that's going to lead teachers to teach something important here. So let's give the music the same respect, whether it's a grade half or a grade six.
I, I,
Yeah,
I,
I agree.
I'll also say this, no matter how well I've known a piece, every time I sit down with a score at a piano and I play something, I always learn something. It's like I could have done the piece 5 times. I could know it, at least in my head. I think I know it. Every time I go, huh, and I'll write something down. So
Yeah.
even if I don't feel like I need to do score study on a piece, I still sit down and I try to make time every week. And then I figure out, oh my goodness, I never realized that this or whatever.
Yeah.
And if I think it's cool, well, they might not think it's cool, but I think it's cool. So I'm going to share it with them and it'll get me
Hmm.
excited about it. So
Yeah,
that fascinates me. I'll always learn something.
absolutely. And there's pieces everywhere like that. I'm literally I look Holst's first suite in E flat, right? I first performed that, I first played it on an instrument probably in, I'm going to say 1987. I would have been in the ninth grade. So that's going back a few years. I'm of an age these days where I can talk openly about having played in the 80s. Um, and yet I'm still learning from that piece. Every now and then I'll get it back out and I'll put it up in front of a community group or in front of a good high school group. And I make a point of reading Fred Fennell's editorial notes about it. When James F. Keane, Jim Keane of University of Illinois fame, came out to Australia in 2015, I had the great privilege of getting to know Jim. We became good mates. So, cut a long story short, a year later, I went and stayed at his house for a few days in San Antonio. We played golf and ate barbecue and did all that stuff. Um, he had Fennell's original score of the Holstein E flat,
Wow.
and I got to conduct from it as this unknown Navy band guy from Australia. It was a wonderful moment. But yeah, there's so much repertoire out there, and particularly in the higher grade stuff. Obviously, the more complex and more artistically interesting, although that's a horrid word, music. Timothy Mars Into the Air is another one. You'll never stop learning about the layers he invented in that thing. It's crazy. To Kelly's, I think his masterwork, An American Elegy. I'm still learning about that piece, and I've conducted this stuff, dozens of times over the years. You open it up and you get it out and you listen to it and you read their notes on it again and you listen to another different recording of it and you go, oh, I never realized the second bassoon did that.
Mm-hmm.
We knew, and yet these are scores that we've prepped, we've worked hard, we know it, we know it, we know it. We could talk about the Holstein E flat for an hour and a half, and you could say something to me that would make me go, "Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. I'm going to check that out." And that for me is what makes a masterwork.
And I think a lot of times, again, well, the point of this is not to be judgy of people,
No,
but if
no.
you go to somebody's school and you open up their scores, is there handwriting all over it, or is it blank?
Mm,
So that might be a good
mm,
self reflection piece for people. If you've been doing a piece of a month or two, and you open it up and there's almost nothing written in, I just find that the better conductors and the more prepared rehearsers have stuff written in all over the place.
yep. Yeah, and I totally agree. When I started my masters with John Lynch at Sydney Conservatorium, whatever year that was, um, he asked me to bring in a couple of the scores, and I'd already been conducting professionally for 10 years at this point. Um, Maybe eight or 10 years, something like that. And he asked me to bring in a few scores that I was currently working on. And he opened up the Paul Lavender Symphonic Dances from West Side Story.
Mm-hmm.
He opened that up, and I had hardly any pencil marks in that. And he's very politely, and John's a beautiful human being and a master teacher. He's flipping page after page and chatting away, and he put it down and he had a drink from his coffee cup and he looked at me and he said, "You conduct in survival mode, right?" And I went, "Yeah, I totally do." I really quickly agreed with that. But he taught me the lesson that, just because your job might require you to do. And at that point, I was doing in that year, would have been 2016, I think. That year, I would have conducted 80 new grade 4, 5, or 6 pieces, 80 in a year, and we would have done 120 concerts. The workload on military band conductors is immense. But what he did teach me that day was that, I needed to get deeper into the score and actually understand the story that's within it and find it and mark it. So I would remember it 10 years from now when I get it back out of my cupboard. Powerful, powerful lesson. And I completely agree with what you're saying there. Um, we learn as we go along, though. There's tricks of the trade. So let me talk briefly, if I may, about conducting flutes, which is my primary instrument when I was a player. Um, One of the biggest things that I learnt from a wonderful conductor here in Australia was to have flutes. You know how flutes often play the last note of phrases and pieces flat?
Mm-hmm.
They just, as they start to run out of air, they just the pitch dies a little bit. Particularly if it's piano or pianissimo dynamic marking. Um, as a conductor, I always ask the flutes verbally in rehearsal if needed, and certainly always by gesture, to smile, have happy high eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
And the quieter we play, the higher we have to pull up on the eyebrows, and that levels out the pitch of flute sections. I see band directors spend inordinate quantities of time tuning young flutes, tuning the instruments of young flute players, forgetting that you can put a flute together and you can have it basically where the instrument is in tune if a robot was to play it, but the kid is 12, or that community musician's 85, and it's their third year playing. They're going to have to find another way. Just building an instrument that's in tune is a nonsense in some ways.
Mm.
So grab hold of those PD opportunities. Grab hold of, if you're struggling with your flute section, find a band director somewhere in the US or in the UK or in Europe or Australia. Find one somewhere online and have a conversation and say, "Hey, here's the issue that I've got. What are your thoughts? Have you got a little quick trick?" And there'll be one. I guarantee there'll be one,
Mm.
because I haven't spent my whole life learning how to teach trombone, but there are people who have. And so we really need to rely on each other and reach out and ask the question. Um, our world of band directors is so generous. I've never had another band director at any level say to me, "I haven't got time for your question, go away."
Hmm.
Not ever. Once they know that you also conduct at any level, then they're happy to share what they know. 100%. No matter how famous, no matter how, powerful or what the big reputation is. Um, you know, that's just how we are as band directors. I think that's our most beautiful quality, is that we're really willing and want to share what we know. Um, yeah.
Right? Because what you share with another teacher is then going to help those students who are lucky enough to have that teacher. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a thing called exponential influence. So, a young band director here in Australia might email me and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this thing in a piece that you wrote. Can you help me out?" Okay, yep, sure, here we go. Why don't you Zoom me and let's chat about it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour if need be. They'll then go and teach their kids that information. And, if it's a high school group, 8 years later, that kid that learnt that thing that day might be a band director,
Hmm.
and we'll teach it to their kids, who one of whom will become a band director, who will teach it to their kids. So that 10 minutes that I invested with Janie Smith or Johnny Bloggs, you know, 15 years ago, can continue to have lasting impact for the next, I don't know, 100 years. What an immense gift we can give each other. That's just awesome. And I've had mentors who have been so generous with me, and have given me things that, you know, I should have paid a fortune for in life lessons and podium lessons. And they just give. So we've got to pay it forwards.
Um,
All right, I feel like we've wandered off topic ever so slightly
no, it's
there.
great. It's great.
So I apologize if we
No,
have.
no, it's great. This is the kind of conversations that a podcast like this is built around. This is awesome.
Great,
Um,
great, great.
for someone who lives in the Northern Hemisphere, I'm a US guy. Um, assuming people listening don't know anything about the Australian band scene, um, give us the scoop. What is the band scene like in Australia?
Okay, I gave this some thought, and I love that you sent me the talking points list prior, because this one could be a really long conversation or a really short one. I think, like a lot of things in Australia, we're small but mighty. Um, the band scene,
What's the
most
population of Australia? How many people live there?
okay, about 26 million.
Okay.
So think New York City. That's our entire population.
Okay.
Um, the town that I live here on the west coast, the city of Perth, our whole metropolitan and extended area around the city is a total of 2 million people. So less than Brooklyn. You know, it's crazy how much room we have here and how few people live on it. But pretty much every high school, every secondary school, and we don't have elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school. We have primary school, which is the first grade, loosely first grade through to sixth grade. And then we have high school or secondary school, which is seventh grade through to 12th grade. And then we toddle off to university or into the workforce or whatever we're going to do. So our education system is a little bit, I want to say a little bit simpler. But our band directors, most schools in Australia have a band of some sort, a band or an orchestra or a choir. There are lots of schools that are specialist music schools. My daughter happens to go to one here in Perth. She is in the eighth grade playing bassoon because she had to pick the most expensive instrument in the world. Because in a former life, I must have done something to deserve that. She had a perfectly functional flute and clarinet, and then chose bassoon. Thanks, darling. But there's 700 kids in the music program at her high school, out of a 3,000 student school. And they're auditioned from all over the city to go to that school. It's called a gifted and talented program, or a GATE program, we call it, for music. And lots of schools have that sort of thing. But she literally does about 50 minutes of band rehearsal a week.
Wow. That's not much.
That's it. No, it's really not. And I know that most schools in the US have many times that number of rehearsals. Some schools are rehearsing every day for an hour and a half a day. A lot of our kids will get to school at, rehearsal will start at 8 o'clock and they're in class at 9. So they're done at 8:50. And that includes time to set up, warm down, pack down. So, you might end up with 30 minutes a week of actual rehearsal time with that 40-piece ensemble in their first year. And yet by the end of high school, we are capable of producing bands that can play grade 4 and 5 music. So when I say small but mighty, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. We've got a wonderful national body called the Australian Band and Orchestra Directors Association, or ABODA for short. And they're split up into all the different states have a state body under that auspice as well. That are kind of their reason for being is to provide professional development, growth and learning for conductors. And that's fantastic. I do a lot of work with the Western Australian ABODA and a couple of the other states in teaching and clinic work and, presenting at conferences and things. But, to give you the idea of the scale over here, we had our national conference last July in Melbourne, and I think the final numbers we had nearly 400 attendees.
Mm.
I've been to the Midwest, I don't know, 4 or 5 times now, and last time I went, it was nearly 19,000. So, the scale is tiny over here, but the work is incredible. Um, bands are usually not particularly well balanced. We have trouble getting kids to play tuba. We have trouble getting kids to play baritone saxophone. Um,
I have a
boys
solution.
want
I have a solution.
to.
I
Okay.
don't want. I don't want
Okay.
to. I don't want to stop you from your train of thoughts. Keep going. But I have a good friend who always said he needed seven tubas in every symphonic band that he had because the name of their school was seven letters. And when they played at the football games, they had seven sousaphones and had to spell out the word of the school. So he said, "We're not going to play without seven tubas." So, but he always said because they had rehearsal right before lunch. He always let the tuba players go 4 minutes before everybody else. So if you played tuba, you were first in the line for lunch every day. He never
Wow.
had a problem getting seven tubas.
That's genius level. He's hacked life as a band director. I bow and scrape. We're
Yeah.
not worthy of people like that in our world. Um, I was just laughing as you were saying that because the high school Hannah goes to is called Churchlands, so I'd need 11 tubas. um, but and in primary school over here, boys want to play the trombone because they can make fart noises.
Yep.
You know, these things are global. I'm sure Spanish boys who are 12 want to do that as well. But yeah, we have a really vibrant scene. It's very small, so everyone knows each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's the famous ones that everybody kind of knows about, and pockets of incredible excellence. The southeastern corner of Queensland, which is over on the east coast, it's the northernmost state on our east coast. Um, it's huge. I mean, the coastline is 3,500 kilometers long, so I think two and a bit, maybe 2,100 miles long.
Well,
Um, and we're double that here in the west. We've got about 4,500 kilometers of coastline here. The distances here are vast. Australia is the size of the continental US. It
wow.
takes 4.5 hours to fly from Perth to Sydney. So it's about the same as flying from LA to New York. But we have this tiny system because our population is so small. But we achieve great things. There's a huge amount of passion. There's expertise. People who've made it their life journey to be great instrumental teachers. Um, and there's some historical stuff behind that. Very briefly, I'm a child of I was born in '73. There you go. I've admitted how old I am.
Hmm.
But I was born in '73, so I was hitting high school in the mid '80s. '86 was my first year of high school, and at 13 years of age. And um, at that time, every state school, so every public school, with a steady enrollment of over 200 students, which is not a big school. That's
Mm-hmm.
quite a little school, all the way up to, I don't know, thousands, um, was state government funded to have a band program with an instrumental teacher, with music stands, timpani, keyboard percussion, tubas, all the big instruments were funded by the government. Um, and a whole generation of us, if we went through, and I could tell you the names, it wouldn't mean anything to your audience, but certainly would in Australia. There's a whole generation of us that grew up in that system in Queensland in the '80s, sorry, in that one state, who have gone on to be professional musicians, professional conductors, band directors, professional composers, something in the performing arts in music. So it was a generational thing.
Hmm.
I guess in your parlance, it might be like thinking about, and it's oversimplifying, but Texas has oil money, so they've got a great band system. But there's a whole bunch of other reasons why the Texas system is what it is, and it produces some exceptional playing. We have those things in Australia as well. Our big struggle in Australia is to try and hang on to that in the modern age where, funding is tight, governments don't have the money they need. And if they do, they want to spend it on sport over here. We're heavily addicted to sport in Australia. Um, everyone has a favourite football team, but not everyone can identify the difference between a clarinet and an oboe.
Hmm.
Um, it's probably the same across the US in some ways. But yeah, so that's the Aussie band scene. We have half a dozen, professional level college bands, or what you would describe as college bands. Um, some of which are led by amazing conductors and can play, at the highest level. Some are not so great, but working really hard every day. We've got about five, maybe six full-time professional military bands that are big wind ensembles, that are 40, 50-piece wind ensembles. So it's a very small microcosm, but the standard is really high. And we achieve incredible things with not enough time, not enough money, not enough kids.
Mm.
So, always really proud and very, very parochial about what we do here in Australia. And we those of us who spend some time in the US and understand some of the systems in the US, and you have many, so it's not something you're ever going to be across all of them, are often a little bit jealous, but also still pretty proud that we get our bands to sound so damn good with 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
And a private lesson or a little group lesson that'll back up what we're playing in band.
Always start
So
with tone.
yeah.
Always start with tone. Tone, tone,
Oh
tone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Breathing, breathing, breathing.
So can you, I kind of asked you this off air a little bit. I'd like you to highlight a teacher or maybe a couple if they come to your mind of that you think just does a fantastic job in whatever situation they're in.
Yeah, I can think of a couple. And I'll leave Australia briefly if I may, and your listeners will follow this hopefully. I do a bit of work and travel periodically, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, across to Auckland in New Zealand. We would say traveling across the ditch. They would say across the Dutch because they have a very strange accent with I sounds in particular. Anyway, I digress. In Auckland, there's a pool of phenomenal music educators and band directors there. And for me, one of the leaders in that group is a gentleman by the name of Chad Davenport. Now, Chad's US trained, left the US with a master's in conducting. Um, I want to say maybe 15 years ago. He'd be pretty close to my age. I think he'd be at least in his mid 40s, mid to late 40s. Um, but he runs a wonderful community band program there, as well as teaches full time as a peripatetic band director across about 4 or 5 schools.
Hmm.
Um, and Chad is this guy. He's so unassuming. He's so quiet. He's so humble, and so very skilled at what he does. I watch him work with student and community groups, and I literally find myself sitting there thinking, "Damn, I wish I was this good." I've wasted half my life becoming mediocre at this stuff, and here's this guy who's just everything he says is the perfect thing to say. Every smile he gives to a kid is timed perfectly, and they respond. Repertoire choices are incredible. I think I mentioned to you off air before we started. Chad's the sort of conductor there. His school groups would walk over hot coals to get that concert done for him.
Hmm.
Um, and yet, if you asked any of the kids, they'd just go, "Oh yeah, he's my band teacher." They may not even be able to identify the things that he does. So he's a master musician, but also, and I think more importantly, he's a master psychologist,
Hmm.
a developmental psychologist. And a damn fine fella to have a beer with, just saying, because that is the other Australian great pastime. We do love a frothy beverage. Coming back to Australia, so special shout out to Chad if he's listening, and I appreciate that. I know Chad was the guy that put you in touch with me,
Yeah.
Kyle. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that lead as well, I guess, or that referral. Um, Coming back to Australia, there's a couple that spring to mind. One is a gentleman by the name of James Bryce. Now, James runs a huge music program, and by huge, at last count, I think 12 months ago, he had 79 peripatetic teachers working for him at his school.
Wow.
He's head of arts, not just head of music, but also head of performing arts at a school. It's a very large all boys private school, private boarding school called Knox Grammar, Knox Grammar School. Um, and so he's got, I don't know, I think all up they've got 40 ensembles from string quartets through to symphony orchestra, choirs, wind ensembles, big bands, combos, you name it. Some kids playing it in some group or other.
Hmm.
Um, but he will achieve standards there. He has every advantage. I'll be the first to admit this. Um, They don't struggle with the socioeconomic of the school. If students can afford to go to that school, then families can afford to support the program. The school is um, a wealthy private school, and I don't say that as a judgy thing. That's just a statement of fact. But the energy that James produces is phenomenal. He's in his office at 5:30 every morning, and he leaves at 11 o'clock at night. And he'll do that all year. He also runs a two-tier community band program in his
Wow.
spare time. He's an examiner for the national examinations body over here. Um, he advises, he runs the body, the committee that choose the repertoire lists, like the state repertoire lists for festival in the state of New South Wales over east. Um, I feel almost, it's a Christmas miracle when I ring him and he answers the phone. Normally, I ring him and leave a message. You go, "Hey James, nothing urgent, bud. Just give me a call back when you get a minute." And it's okay. It's now April. It's okay if that's in August. He's one of those guys. But I tell you, again, his kids would walk over hot coals for him. He's very demanding. He's very demanding. His expectation of every one of his students is crystal clear. They know it. They know they have to work hard. They know the privilege that they're enjoying, and they're taught to maximize the opportunity, and they do. These kids are phenomenal. I heard his grade, I think it was his 10th or 11th grade orchestra, not even his top orchestra, played Dan's on number 2
Mm.
4 or 5 years ago. And I would pay $60 to sit in an orchestra hall and listen to an ensemble like that play. And that's with trained critical ears. I literally couldn't have faulted that performance. And that was only about, they still had 3 or 4 rehearsals to go before the performance. It's insane. Noting that we need to recognise gender diversity over here as well. There's a couple of amazing women who work in the southeast corner of Queensland who I want to throw a shout out to as well. One is named Sherelle Guest and the other is Jodie Lutherborough. And Jodie and Sherelle have been mates for years and years and years. They're both my age. They both came out of that system in Queensland that I described before in the 80s. They went through and studied under a name that a lot of your listeners will know. They both studied under Ralph Holmgren, the well-known Australian composer and founder of Brolga Music at Queensland University of Technology, where they used to teach an instrumental and have restarted recently teaching a degree in instrumental music education. So, they were taught to be band directors. That's been their pathway. And Sherelle is a powerhouse. She knows everything there is to know about level half to level 2 music. She can rattle off repertoire like you wouldn't believe, and is a wonderful pedagogue. Jodie is equally good, but Jodie's superpower in front of an ensemble. But Jodie's superpower is teaching other teachers. So she's really become that sort of area coordinator type of figure, and provides a lot of PD, provides a lot of support to in-service teachers, we call them here. So student teachers who are having to do their 6 and 8 week practical parts of their education degrees. If you were a young uni student who wanted to become a band director or an instrumental music teacher in Queensland, and you got selected somehow to go and do two or three of your sessions or periods with Jodie Lutherborough, you'd be in very good shape. You couldn't be a bad band director after that start. I don't see how you could even make that happen. So shout out to them. I love that anybody can do what we do, but you got to love it. You really got to love it. You got to want it. It takes a lot of work, and it'll make your heart tired, but it'll make your heart full. And so that's why we do what we do. Those of us who have the privilege of standing on a podium somewhere, we've got the best job in the world.
Sure do. Final question for you as we wrap up again. Thank you so much for the time and the conversation. Is around an older piece of music or an older composer that you think people maybe don't play and you wish you saw played more? Maybe a piece that when you were younger, a lot of bands did, but now, because we all struggle with this, we want to do new music. New music is great, but there's also great old music, and we want to make sure we're balancing history with new music and all that stuff. So is there a composer or a piece that jumps out at you right away that you just would like to put a plug out there that maybe people check out?
The Cornerstone works, the Holsts, the Vaughan Williams, all of those things. They're all amazing, and yeah, we got to know that stuff. Granger's Lincolnshire Posy is a piece I think all serious conductors should, and I say serious as in anyone who actually wants to get good at it, should at least be aware of. So as a general comment, I think, yeah, we pay homage and need to respect and understand the old music. What's really cool is people like, and I know some of your listeners will disagree with this, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Art's meant to create argument. I know that John Sweeney has been doing over the last several years, been doing some really approachable grade 2.5 versions of movements of the Lincolnshire Posy and
Michael Sweeney.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes, Michael Sweeney. He's been making that classic music, that cornerstone repertoire, accessible for younger groups. And I think as long as we understand the context that that's being done in and understand that he hopes, and I hope, that fires the curiosity of those young musicians to explore I guess in inverted commas, the grown-up versions of those, the original versions of those masterworks. But we have to let it lead us somewhere, and it leads us to the new music. It's incredibly exciting, the music that's being written by, and to single out just a very few of many of my beautiful friends, Omar Thomas, Kevin Day, Nicole Piuno, Kate Nishimura from up in Canada, Randall Standridge, who else? Catherine Bergman, Lindsay Bronnenkamp. These sort of, and I say young because they're all younger than me by some decades. I'm getting on in age, but those people are writing incredible music, and as composition students, they've all listened and worked through the masterworks. You can hear that. You can hear quality writing is made on a basis of great harmonic knowledge, and that's taught using the masterworks.
Yeah.
So, if you could pick two pieces right now, okay, let's do this. Alfred Reed's El Camino Real. I love the paso doble nature of it. I love the energy of it. I love the fire of it. I love the middle section is so serene is the word I want to use. And it finishes with this flourish that is just designed to bring the house down. And the other one I would suggest would be Kevin Day, Breathe.
Great.
Published by Murphy Music Press, Breathe. But if you're gonna listen to that, before you listen to the band version, jump on YouTube and look it up and have a listen to Kevin playing it on piano. He originally wrote it as a piano solo. Have a listen to him play it and understand the spacing and patience and timing of it, and then approach the band version of it with that same level of patience and time, allowing sound to just sit. Because I think that's a bit of a lost art in band music. Is this idea that we have to be incredibly patient and allow time for the music to percolate in the space and for it to just be. I know that sounds very artsy of me, but after all, that's what we are. We're artists. Yeah, so they're the two. There you go.
Great. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle. It's been a real pleasure, and good luck, and hopefully we'll see lots of your listeners over at Midwest in December.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.